I actually have some regrets. As we continue to operate Final Fantasy XIV, we have tried to make it more comfortable and stress-free for players to enjoy. But when I think back on the past 10 years, I think we may have gone a bit too far in that regard. That was Yoshi P from Final Fantasy XIV talking about his beloved game, the game that he is the head of, Final Fantasy XIV, on kind of this eve of the 10-year anniversary of the game. Or at least the 10-year anniversary of A Realm Reborn. And it brings up this huge question that has been basically being asked by MMO players all over for probably more than the last 10 years, probably more like the last 15 years or so. Are MMOs, including Final Fantasy XIV, too easy? In a word, yeah. Now you may be rushing to counter that argument, but I think I might know what you're going to say. The argument that MMOs are plenty difficult usually revolves around the top tier gameplay, how your harder dungeons and raids, your mythics, Mythics Plus, or your PvP. Basically, the end game. Alternatively, some players might point to grind or time investment as evidence of scope or difficulty. And to a point, this works. This is correct. But what I think Yoshi P is talking about, or at least what I hope he is talking about, isn't the end game. It's been a long-held belief of mine that MMOs post-WoW have suffered from a very top-heavy approach in the effort to garner players quickly through ease of advancement. When MMOs first came on the scene, they started out punishing, and the concept of a top-heavy endgame wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is today. The entire game was difficult, from level 1 to level 50, though perhaps not quite as difficult as it can get now in endgames with more things that you can throw at players. And that difficulty was aided in a lot of ways by a lack of quality of life features and add-ons for callouts. You didn't have add-ons constantly telling you what rotation to do or how to get out of the fire. And no, that's not just me saying like, oh, I'm old now, so it was better back then. It was just a fact there. That wasn't there. And some of it was really annoying. I will always remember how freaking annoying it was having to set up individual keys to respond to a freaking callout in the in-game that was in the text box, the same text box where all your raid instructions were going from your raid leader on EverQuest. If you know the performer in EverQuest, you know exactly what I'm talking about and how frustrating that fight could be. It was also aided by things like resource scarcity, like mana to cast heals or desperately needed CC, because NPCs were treated as being individually difficult, not swarm difficult. Basically, each enemy was a threat, not the 5 enemies you pull, but the one of them. So just multiply that by 5. And the resource scarcity normally came in with a slower gameplay because you had to regain said resource. Something that's kind of gone away because, well, it's slow. I think that's mainly the reason. It is slow. Star Wars Galaxies was distinctly lacking in an endgame, but it was still fairly easy to go in and get yourself killed, especially if you tried to push a lair mission and ended up spawning one too many Rancors. Ultima Online was perilous the moment you stepped outside of city limits, and not just because of other players who wanted your loot. Wandering into the wrong place or without the proper skills and equipment, and you'd have a very long trip to go get your body or find a wandering healer before players looted you, because that would actually happen. Or hell, even the NPC, once they had slain you, would loot one item randomly from your corpse after killing you, just, you know, to add a little bit insult to injury. EverQuest, of course, killed you with snakes that could kick, providing a punishing opening act that would continue across the game. It was almost always hard, and raids were just a harder version of that with more people at once. Early EverQuest raids didn't have the same kind of concepts later MMOs would of not standing in the fire because, well, the fire was everywhere. It was unavoidable. You just burned and hoped the thing died before your healers did, or before they ran out of mana. I just realized that in this same video, I think I said mana and mana. I don't know. Which one is it? Because I don't actually know. And honestly, yeah, okay, you in early EverQuest, you did kind of try and hide your healers behind the wall, if possible. The point here is that there wasn't a casual, easy path that led to an optional difficulty days, weeks, or months later. There wasn't a paved road to just kind of like stream by. You had to go off-roading, and sometimes that would end in disaster. Final Fantasy XIV has much of what I would consider modern MMO design. That is an easy entry into the game that pulls you along without much fear or friction, or as Yoshi P puts it in the interview, stress. I don't think many players of Final Fantasy XIV would say there's a lot of challenge in the early stages of the game as you go about soloing quests, dabbling in fates, or even early dungeons. I honestly can't remember dying in Final Fantasy XIV unless I did something deliberately silly or failed a mechanic in a dungeon. Final Fantasy XIV's difficulty, like most modern MMOs, exists at an optional endgame. Or I suppose if you play Ninja, because holy shit, Ninja was confusing as hell to me. There were just so many freaking buttons. I mean, it's entirely possible that that's just because I'm bad and I don't know how to deal with it, but you know what? I'll stick with my Samurai because that made sense to me. I think MMOs in general could benefit from a little bit of retrospection, which sounds like might be coming from Yoshi P with Final Fantasy XIV, as he said the same in an interview per Famitsu and Games Radar. He added, "A video game should of course have an element of stress, but how to handle that properly is extremely difficult." Yoshi P wasn't clear in the interview in which specific areas he thinks Final Fantasy XIV has become too chilled out, but he compared it to a side-scrolling platformer without any pitfalls if you miss a jump. Of course, the game would lose its stress, but it would also lose its fun, he said. Going back to Final Fantasy XIV, Yoshi P said he hopes to restore a better balance of risk and reward. If we do that, we can give everyone a better challenge, in a good way, than ever before. My hope is that going forward, Final Fantasy XIV adds some of that stress, some of that fear, some of that risk versus reward that has been so enticing to millions of MMO players over the years and has been distinctly lacking in most modern MMOs until you get to the end game. If done well, I could see this not just impacting Final Fantasy XIV, but many MMOs that could follow suit, seeing as Final Fantasy XIV has for a very long time now been either the #1 or the #2 largest MMO in the space. And if they can find a way to bring back in some of that challenge early on, instead of tucking it all away nice and hidden at the end of the game, well then maybe some of the other MMOs will see that and see it as potentially, hopefully, maybe a success, and bring it to the rest of the MMO space as well. Because it has been something that is sorely missing in a space that is telling you, hey, no, you know what you need to do? Put in 50 or 60 hours and then the game gets challenging and fun. Put in 50 to 60 hours of boring, repetitive, daily tasks to actually get to the game. If we've learned anything in the past 10 years or 15 years, it's maybe that, you know, that paved road can be nice. It's good to keep players on it and they will just keep going down that road because it is the path of least resistance. But sometimes it's really helpful and a lot of fun to go off-road and get some of the bumps and bruises that you get along the way, because it creates some memorable stories. And it's something that I did a bit of a deeper dive in if you really want to get into it in this video right here. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take it easy.